Mick, can you hear me?
I can hear you. How you going?
Finally. Took too long.
No
Yeah, I
worries.
just figured out Zoom since May 30th. They are updating everything and you cannot use the older versions. And so both me and Nick, and it's AM, like I think it's 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. where he's at. Both of us were trying to get in, but at least we made it. Sorry to everybody who had to wait for 25 minutes. And I apologize to you, Mick, too.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. So, would you need to demo the screen?
Yeah, I can share the screen if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I've got a little message here that says the host disabled um, sharing screen. So you're able to give me permission to do that?
Okay, yeah, I'll do it now. I'll do it in a second. It's just new Zoom that's harder for me. So while I'm doing that, can you please introduce yourself to people, just so they know your experience and they know what you're going to be talking about.
Um, well, firstly, my name's Mick Downer. I'm a professional coach in the New Zealand Professional League. Prior to coming to New Zealand, I spent about a decade coaching in the Australian Professional League, the NBL there, and coached with um, our national men's Olympic team at the Rio Olympics, and prior to that, also involved with our national junior team. So I've been a professional basketball coach for about 15 years now, 15 to 20 years.
Okay. Okay. And Nick told me that this was your first year as a head coach of Canterbury Rams, right?
Yes, 2019 was came here last year and led our team to the playoffs, and we had a good year, and we were looking really good for 2020. But obviously, something happened in the world, so it changed everything. But our league, actually, the country here has handled the coronavirus very well, and we won't be playing a full league, but we're playing a 6-week version of a league starting in 3 weeks' time.
Okay. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. And besides being the head coach for the main team, I know you're also you're also directing the youth programs too, right?
Yeah, we've the prior to myself coming here, the organisation is about 6 years old. The current ownership is about 6 years into it, and they have a strong vision and belief in the youth programs, and so we have an academy for our high school age athletes, and have a lot of young players that head to the US to college on scholarships, and we do a lot of things in our region to develop coaches and young players. So my wife's also involved in that. She's a professional coach as well. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, it's a good setup. It's a very, very good pathway from junior players to the pro players.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. Well, now you should be able to share the screen and we're ready to go.
All right. Let me just check. I've got everything sorted out here.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see the PowerPoint up on your screen?
Yep. If people who are in the conference, if you can't see it, just type it in the chat, just so I know. But it looks like we're good.
So yeah, so there was a few areas that you asked me to talk to. So I've put those there on the cover page. So we're going to jump straight into I guess building successful culture.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if this PowerPoint works. So we've got just a short little video here that goes for a minute. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not sure about the internet speed, but it's only 1 minute long. And it's just a little bit about the club that I coach at the moment. Everybody on your feet, let's go! We've got 3 minutes in this last quarter. Come on, go, let's see it. Competition over here. On your How did that video play?
Yeah, it was all right. It was all right. It was a little bit slow at some point, but I mean that's Zoom problem, so I'm
That's
used to
a
that already. But good to
just
see that the gym is packed.
um, the reason I put that video in is it's obviously a marketing piece that was put on social media, but I think what it does, it shows some strong images around what a basketball club can be. It shows the fans a lot and features the players a lot. So as a coach, I think it's really important our ability to facilitate the connection between our sponsors and the government and our fan base and ticket holders, the people that come to the game and the heroes that we have in our team. And I think in the pro environment, that's a really important thing. Maybe with the youth players, it's more about the parents and the schools and the support people that help the young players and connecting them. So I've put up here on this slide just we talked about a very basic definition around what is culture in the context of a sporting team. So you'll often hear people talk about values, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. So when we look at those things, values, I see a lot of organizations, coaches will talk about what they value, and it will be a lot of talk. We'll say what we're going to do or what our organization stands for, and that's reinforced by our beliefs. So how not only what we say but how we think about the way we are as an organization. And then obviously it gets more and more important because then it becomes into things like your attitude, and that's a reflection on how do you approach building your culture. But ultimately all those things don't mean as much as what do you actually do, what are the behaviors that everyone in your organization and your players have, what do they demonstrate, because that's what people will see, that's what the fans will see, the opposition will see. And ultimately that's the most important thing. And we have a saying, don't tell me what you're going to do, show me what you're going to do. And so when it comes to as leading an organization, I think that's quite important that we continually talk about our behaviors and ensure that the standards that we've set and agreed to as an organization, that we adhere to those. How is that going with everyone? And feel free if they want to put their video on. That's okay.
Yep.
Am I speaking too fast?
No.
Jump in and let me know, Bussy, if I'm speaking too fast.
Okay, I will.
So I think, again, it's very important that that we work with people when we talk about culture, and we obviously have a common goal, but the goal for the team, your basketball team, to be the best, the team that wins or the best offensive or defensive team, whatever the things are that you want your team to do, it's important that the way your team operates is that you treat and support the people ultimately as the biggest priority in your organization. Because if people feel valued and they feel that their talents are being used in the organization, then that's your best chance of being successful, is to get the most out of people. And so I think culture's always obviously got to start there is the people. So with people in an organization, a basketball team or a basketball club, with its staff and the players, it's quite a small business. It's not it's not hundreds of people. Even the biggest clubs throughout Europe don't have hundreds of people employed. We have thousands and thousands of fans, but the actual people that work internally in the club is a small group. Your coaches, your front office, general manager, your players, your doctor, your physios. It's a small group of people, and it's very often very diverse. People with different cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, some from poor social economic, not a lot of money, and other people from wealth. So I think the challenge, but the fun part, is how do you connect all these different people with different motivations and backgrounds to ultimately work towards, a common goal, and that's the club to be successful. So we start our planning with the people, and then we obviously have to have a process in place. And so I like this image here, where if there is no direction, you got a lot of people all over the place. They're doing their thing. I think I'm the most important person as the head coach, and my best player is the most important person, and the general manager is the most important person. Then you can let your ego get in the road of actually performing. And so it's very important that there's very clear direction, communication. We know what our roles are. I often hear American coaches talk about in the NBA, where they have a lot of staff that you stay in your lane. You may be the video analyst, or you could be the shooting coach, or you could be the draft expert, but you're aware of what's on the freeway, of all the cars going everywhere and all the staff in your organization, and you have to work together. But you ultimately really focus on your primary role of what's ahead of you in your lane. And the other part around your role is, it's important, the clubs that can be successful for a long period of time, and you study NBA clubs, EuroLeague basketball clubs, or the EPL soccer clubs, the ones obviously they have great resources, but you'll often see alignment. And it's, for me, at a lower level, the professional league is good here in New Zealand and in Australia particularly, but maybe the resources aren't the same as the NBA. But the people are just as important, and the team that you have, it's really, really critical that the owner and his vision, or their vision, or the management group and the general manager and the commercial team, your doctor, your physio or trainer, and your athletes are all in alignment, working towards the same thing. It's no good, winning every game at home, but not getting any crowd to the game, or having great crowds and marketing and things are going great in the front office, but the team doesn't win any basketball games and play a poor style of basketball. So to be successful as an organization, you need all the different elements of your business aligned and working together. And a great analogy for that is the sport of rowing.
Yeah.
I had to use a New Zealand picture here because I'm living in New Zealand at the moment, and I believe they're passionate, but rowing's a fascinating sport, because if you have the team rowing, as soon as somebody just doesn't carry their weight, or they're out of rhythm or out of time, that can really mess with the overall production of the team. And so everyone has a role in that team. And so just like a basketball club, if you can have your youth coach and your pro coaches working together, your marketing and social media people in alignment when it comes to the messages that you send to your fans, if all those things are working well together, then you can row in unison and head in the right direction. So I'm happy to take any questions if you want, or I can keep going ahead with the presentation, Bossy, whatever you think.
Okay, yeah, let me just say that people in the chat who are watching, you're more than welcome to ask the questions in the chat, and we'll go over and ask Mick just right during the presentation, not waiting until the end. If I see the question, or if I have some, I'll ask you when you have this break.
When I take a breath.
Yeah.
I stop talking. So the next little part I wanted to talk about is, it's really important and that everyone in your organization actually understands what you believe success is. And that can be measured in a lot of different ways. But, I've been in many professional teams where it's a different environment. Some smaller teams, they obviously want to win, but the reality is, just having a competitive team that has a chance to make playoffs is a good outcome. It's more about their small city, just they're very proud of their professional basketball team. Whereas there's other large franchises that expect to win. They win, and if you don't win, the coach is fired. They change the players. Things happen quickly there because the expectation is a lot higher. And I don't know Russia as well, but I do believe that most professional leagues are like that around the world. People want to win, but it's important that your management and everyone in the organization they don't have to agree, but they need to be aligned to what success is. So here's an example of some common things I think are important to define what success is. And so being a professional team, you have to survive financially. If there's no money there, then there's no players, there's no coach, there's no team. So and everyone helps in that space. The players need to play and behave the right way. Your office needs to be able to sell sponsorship and sell enough tickets to the games for the fans. And so the financial performance is very important. I think having an exciting style of play is an important thing. I've been in some cities where the city is, we call it down here a blue collar city, hard working city. People maybe with less income, but they're very proud and they're tough people. And then I've been with clubs that maybe trendy, they call it white collar over here. More money, more affluent, a different type of city. So it's important that the brand of basketball you play, your fans can relate to that basketball and they enjoy that basketball, whatever that is. Hard-nosed, tough, grind out basketball or free-flowing Los Angeles Lakers Showtime basketball. There's different types of basketball that can be played even in the same league.
Mm-hmm. And there's a question by Nick, and it's right on point. So coaches always talk about having a positive culture and setting up positive culture, but how do you make it organic and not forced?
I will definitely come to that in the next couple of slides, because I think that's part of you as a person and your philosophy and how you like to operate each day. So we'll come back to that for sure.
Okay.
A couple other things on that. How do you measure? Some things are subjective and other things are objective, and you can truly measure them. So I think you don't have to be an expert to know whether your team is competitive or not. Do they keep fighting and do they play right to the end of the game? If the game's decided with a minute or two to go, do they still keep playing hard? So having a competitive team can be measured. I think your players, are they developing and improving? So if you have young players coming through, I remember seeing Ricky Rubio as a 16-year-old player in Juventud, and more recently Luka Doncic when he was at Real Madrid. I went there when he was a 17-year-old playing in the young team and also with the EuroLeague team. And those big clubs have a lot of resources and a lot of good coaching, but players like him continue to develop and they work hard. And so I have an example later on. The letters there, the IPP, we just refer to that as an individual performance plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think retention is important. So we always talk about recruiting players, but if you have a good culture, then players are going to want to stay at your club as much as possible, and particularly with junior clubs. So retaining players and having the core group of players. I know through Europe there's been some very good American imports that have played for CSKA Moscow or FC Barcelona, like some of the big clubs. They've stayed there for many years because they've been good players and good for the culture. You have to have very good recruitment strategy. I think the NBA and the G League do that close to the best in the world, just with how they approach it. But you have to have a strategy as an organization that's good around recruitment. The other part is your leadership. I don't know many teams that have won championships without strong leadership, both from their owner, from their general manager, their head coach, and most importantly, their players. And it's the leadership in the locker room and away from the basketball court that's important. So teams that are good often have good leaders in their locker room. And then the last part is the relationships that you have with your staff and their ability as staff to grow. If you're an assistant coach, a lot of assistant coaches want to become head coaches. The assistant trainer wants to be the head trainer at some point. And you see organizations like Duke University or the San Antonio Spurs with Rod Popovich, but their measure of success is how successful staff they've had in their organization who have moved on and done well in other organizations, and they don't resent that. They use that as a strength. They believe that's important. So that really is a measure of success if people thrive in your organization and then move on to bigger and better things when it's their opportunity. And everyone wants to win. So if you consistently win, and that's easy to measure, you just look at the scoreboard. So, but yes, we all want to win, but to win, you need to be able to do all of these other things first. So just to reinforce the fans, the money that sponsors may pay is really important, and you can measure that. How much income did you bring in? The chemistry and the relationships of the staff and your players. Do they enjoy the game? And obviously you can do reports, analytics and advanced reports, and you need to be held accountable. That's really, really important. That's just an example of a shot chart, but the analytic side of things now, you can pretty much report on any part of the game that you want to report on. So, but I think without getting into detail, it's just an important part of measuring your success is ensuring that you do have some sort of analytical reports that can give you feedback on whether or not you're achieving the goals that you set out to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And sorry for interrupting you. So can you go back to the previous slide? I wanted to ask about the opponent shot value by location. So the red one is the one where you are the best on defense, right?
Yeah. So the percentage is quite low compared to the rest of the league. We were the best defensive team, us and the team that won the championship last year. Take the top 20 defensive analytics. We pretty much finished top 2 in every single one of those analytics. But we protected the rim very well last year, and we didn't really have a true shot blocking center. It was more, I think we had athletic forwards and our rules and our coverage and discipline. I think that definitely helped. So, and we defended the 3-point line extremely well.
Okay. And talking about the reports, how many people are in charge of that? Is it only one assistant, or is it more where somebody's in charge of 3-pointers, somebody's in charge of all the paint takes?
So I have 3 assistant coaches. They actually are all volunteer coaches. They're not professional. Okay. They all work jobs. One of my assistant coaches, I'll go through it quickly. My lead assistant coach is an experienced ex-player. He played in the league for many, many years, a guard. If I'm injured or sick, he would coach the team. So he looks after, the player development. He oversees our plans with all of our player development. Another assistant coach I have is a young assistant coach who's very smart, very talented, very analytically minded, and knows a lot of the young players in the country. And so he looks after our retention and our recruitment, our talent identification. But the third coach is what I want to talk about. He's a lecturer at the university here, and he lectures in sports coaching and in analytics. And so we're very lucky because he's also the national 3x3 head coach as well. And he runs an internship program. And so we have 4 interns every year, 3 to 4 interns that work with the team and through the video software, do all of our analytical reports and statistical reports. So we're extremely lucky. That's not normal in our league. It's just because we have a good relationship with the university, and and have the coach on staff. And so that's how we do the work. But in games, those analysts, they sit behind the bench in games and they feed information to the assistant coach that was in charge of that game scout. So he'll have the game scout and they'll be feeding. They often have a live monitor with images and things that aren't provided by the statisticians. So other statistics that we like to measure, they'll have displayed on a monitor next to the bench, so we get live feedback. Okay, simple things like 3 stops in a row. We call that a kill. If we get, that's common all around the world. If you get 3 stops in a row, we look at how many deflections we get as well, and how many hustle plays per minute each player. So it doesn't matter if they play 5 minutes or 35 minutes, but whether they try to take a charge, they take a charge, they get a loose ball recovery, they get a deflection. We stat a bunch of effort plays as well, and so we give that feedback in games live.
Okay, and that's good to know that you have those volunteers too, because now when I have conversations with the pro players that I work with, and they just asking me about what I think and all that, and I'm saying, well, one day I'm going to be the head coach, I'll for sure have some 4 or 5 volunteers, just because there are plenty of people who want to be coaches in the future, but maybe they just don't have a chance to get there, or they think there's a stereotype that in order to be a coach you have to play previously professionally. And so you giving this example just means a lot to me. It means that I'm not the only one who thinks like that.
Yeah, no, it's often a lot of coaches are ex-players from an elite level. I was on the very fringe of making the pro league in Australia when I was a young player, and played a little bit in the second division, but I got into coaching in my early 20s, and a lot of that was volunteer. I volunteered for 5 years with different professional teams and coached youth basketball. So it's important, if you love the game and your goal is to become a full-time coach, starting out volunteering and working for good coaches, I think is an important part of it. So one of the assistants now, he was an intern last year. He was one of the analysts, and now he's moved up into the assistant coach role, which is fantastic.
Okay.
So this was Nick asked the question a little earlier, just about positive culture. So I think, firstly, it's up to the coach around what sort of environment do they want to create for all their staff and their players. So when the players come to work each day, do they know that there won't be much fun? They'll work really hard, and they may get yelled at, and things will be difficult, and they may not feel like they're enjoying it, but they're getting better. Or at the other end, do they want to come to an environment that doesn't really have that many strict rules? They can just scrimmage a lot. They have lots of fun. They, not so much discipline. So there's lots of different environments, and people can be successful in different ways. But I truly believe that as a coach, your philosophy and your behaviors are really important, because they set the standard for all your staff and your players. And so this is just some of the things that I think are important around when you're a coach and you're trying to, establish the environment that you want. These are the things that we go through. So the first thing is you've got to have a vision. So if you have a player that is new to the organization or new to the team, helping them become educated and ingrained into that environment as quickly as possible, and for them to understand what is the environment about, what is the expectations. And that all comes down to that first part. Do you have a vision? The players and the team understand what the vision of the club and the coach is? And then all of our decisions are made around, and again, maybe it's a little bit different here, I'm not sure, but with coaches, there's definitely some coaches that are animated and charismatic and have big personalities on the side of the court. But often you'll find in this part of the world that, the coaches are important, and they're in the media, and they'll be standing up in games and talking, and the cameras will be on them, but often they will step back because it's really the players that are the focal point of the game. And so all of our decisions are based around the athletes being at the center of our business. What's the best thing for our players in regards to their development? And then for the team to do well, if a coach is the one that is like the policeman all the time, that has to enforce the rules and has to tell the players, you can't do this, you can do that, you can't do this, you can do that. If that happens, that's one that's tiring, very, very tiring. That can become negative, and the coach can be viewed, in a negative way. It is best when it's done by the players, and I think the Spurs are a great example of what Tim Duncan did for many, many years. David Robinson before him, how they helped Tony Parker as a young player, and Manu Ginobili, and so I think it's important that the players, the team drives the culture, with the coach just overseeing it and managing it. I think being positive, people are positive when they're confident, when they enjoy things. So I'm positive when I go to the beach, when I see the sun out and the waves, and it's beautiful, and I can have a coffee and then I can go in the water. My mind, I'm positive straight away. So I can't bring the beach to the practice court, but I can ensure that I have energy and I'm positive. And when players walk in, I shake their hand and I say hello, and I try to create a positive environment that people want to come to work. They want to enjoy coming to practice. They want to enjoy being around the people at work. So I think that's important. That's simple. That doesn't take money. That's just effort. So, and then the next thing with that is you hire players because they have talent. And so the big trick these days, with everyone so focused, with a lot of skills trainers and individual coaches, is getting the balance of what an individual player needs. Maybe he's a pro player in Europe that wants to go to the NBA. But for him to get to the NBA, he has to work on his own skills, but he also has to perform for his team. And so understanding how your talent can fit into what the team is after is really important. And that's a challenging and a difficult and a fluid thing that changes often. So, but I think your environment can be positive. Players believe that their talents are being utilized. And there's only so many shots in a basketball game. So, and shooting's, the most important skill in the game, but there's still so many other things that players can do to impact the game of basketball. So I think it's important that people don't get confused with just shooting. They need to understand that setting a great screen, being a hard cutter, communicating on defense, blocking out your man and fighting him in the rebounding contest, cheering on the bench and being positive. If you're a smart player, helping a player that struggles to pick up concepts. There's so many things that players can do to contribute to the team's success and to contribute to positive environment. But as a coach, you have to be aware of that. If we only celebrate the shot and not everything else, the screen, the spacing, the delivery of the pass, then players won't feel as appreciated. I think the other couple of things here, just to finish, trust. If you're in a relationship where you have trust, then you're a greater chance of having an enjoyable, thriving, positive relationship. If there is no trust, then that makes it difficult. And trust, you can't just force the issue. Nick asked about organic. It just takes time. When you meet people, you get that sense straight away, whether they're okay or you're not too sure or they're a bit suspect. So I think being genuine, being yourself, and just investing time to develop trust and being honest with people. I think trust and honesty is very important. So there's a couple of things I think around the philosophy and the training environment. And then I just put up these other couple of things here and quickly talk to those. So I don't think you need a lot of rules. The players have contracts as it is. I think when it comes to what you do at practice is very simple. If you see something, you know when something's right or wrong. And so if you see something, you should say it. If someone's, slipping out of screens all the time and not setting the pick when they should set the pick in that context, or they're not talking on defense, like you need to say something about that. Say it in the right way, but you need to say something. But more importantly, this day and age is listening. So many people with young kids with their devices, I'm sure it's the same around the world in Europe, but people are not good listeners now. So I think if someone makes the effort to talk to you, you need to listen and take on board the message. But then more importantly, if you've heard their message and I've said, hey, Barcy, you need to block out that guy next possession. Stop giving up rebounds. Block him out. You need to do that. As a team, we need to see that you do that. So that's very, very simple. And we stop practice when we need to, when we see a breakdown on defense, and we ask the players, what happened? Who did or didn't talk? What was said? Did you hear him? Like, I think those sorts of questions are important so players understand that, they need to control these situations at training. The red flags and the rewards, each week when we have our meeting, we don't have to, we call red flags issues, fires, problems that we need to, hopefully any problems we had during the week we've dealt with right then and there, but maybe we need to bring a player in and sit down and have a discussion about some issues. But more importantly, we spend way more time on the rewards. If we have a player that does a good job in the community, talking with young players, going to a school or a clinic, we'll make a big deal about that. So I think if you reward the right behaviors, then people will continue to do those things. So we spend more energies in focusing on the positive things. And then the last thing at the bottom of the slide is the above the line. So every team will have their standards, and we talk about the standards, we agree to the standards, and now it's the coach's job to support the players, ensuring that if we say we're going to be 10 minutes early to every session, we need to be 10 minutes early to every session, not a minute late. So whatever the standards are in any context, it's important that you live and you breathe those standards. Is there any questions about that stuff? Does anyone have any comments around?
I want to ask, how much would it be? Would the ratio of positive negative, would it be different for young players, for the rookies, and for the vets, or it would be the same where you would want it to be more positive?
Okay. So there's a couple of things to that. I treat everyone, and the feedback you would get from players, I treat everyone fairly and equitably, but how I might talk to a 30-year-old veteran that's got a couple of kids and has played the game for 10 years and has got a lot of miles in his car, he's earned respect, but he still has to perform. So if he's not doing what we said we needed done, then I'll challenge him, or I would hope that another player would challenge him regardless of that age. And so I think that's an important one, because when you have a culture where your best players or your most experienced players are the ones that demonstrate the best behaviors and the best standards, then that's going to be great for your young players. If your best players, stay up late, drink too much, are late to practice, cut practice, don't treat the young players well, then you're not going to have a good culture at all. They're the wrong people. So I think that's the first thing, is that great players want to be coached. People with big egos don't want to be coached. So they want to be managed, and they want love shown. So I think getting the right, the right leaders is important, and that can be developed over the course of time. With the young players, I think we can be a little bit more critical in our coaching eye, because they have more things that they're learning and they need to work on. So how you deliver that message is very important, so we don't crush the confidence of young players. and how your senior players treat your young players, I think is very, very important as well. There's a natural thing, the veteran player, the young player, but the best cultures I've seen are not the young players being hazed or being put through difficult times. The veteran players take them under their wings. Now they're strong with them and they demand a high standard because maybe the young players don't understand what hard work is yet. And we use the word yet a lot. So maybe there is a little bit of tough love, but it comes from a place where they care about the young player meeting their potential. And I think that's an important, really, really important one. With young players, it's the influence. They're impressionable, and sometimes they're impressionable in the wrong things. They see the wrong, they get too carried away with the wrong stuff that they see that doesn't help them right now. So I think focus is a very important skill for young players to have, and patience is the biggest challenge. They need to be patient and continue to work on their craft. Younger people want stuff. They want gratification and they want success early. And unfortunately, we reward that too much in society.
Okay. And you mentioned the players with the egos. So when you sign someone and that player comes to training camp and you start the season and you see that he's hurting the coaching philosophy and he's hurting the atmosphere of the team, what would you try to do? Would you want to cut him right away, or you would want to talk to him and see how he reacts? What would be your actions here?
I think you use every possible resource that you have available. Maybe there's another player on the team that has a real good relationship. Maybe they played on other teams previously or something like that. Maybe there's an assistant coach, but it's all about trying to find a connection, because if you don't get on top of that problem right at the start, then it's not going to get any better. It only gets worse, obviously. And again, sometimes it depends. In the professional game, it's different. Maybe the owner says, hey, that's the player that we're having, and you have no choice as the coach. But what choice you do have is making the best out of the situation. And it's like the poker. You get the cards dealt to you, you make the best possible hand. And if you've got a shitty hand, then you've got to bluff your way through and try and beat the opponent. So I just think it's important. Maybe you, as a coach, you have to lead the strategy, but the strategies aren't always just you. You've got to utilize any possible way to try and connect with that person. So, because again, the thing is, with experienced players or players that, you say ego, but, talent, players that have a lot of talent, they also have strong opinions, and their opinions need to be heard. And so maybe there is some stuff that you can give a little bit with as a coach that doesn't compromise your standards or change completely the way you want the game played. You believe this team can play. And that's always the issue, from what I understand, is like the most talented players have strong opinions about how to best utilize their talent. So it is a little bit of a negotiation, I think, if you can start at that place and then explain your side of things. And again, it just takes time to have those conversations. But if you have the right to say, hey, not the right player, see you later, you cut up the contract, they go somewhere else, then lucky you. But that's the easy out. The path that's harder but more rewarding is if you can help behavioral change or you help influence. And I think often people think that when you disagree with someone, it's a personal thing. It's not. Having a different opinion is good, is healthy. It's fine. But there needs to be acceptance after you've had a meeting with your coaching staff, when you scout preparation with your star player, when you talk about some issues, you can have your disagreements and different opinions. But once you leave a meeting, there has to be 100%, okay, we agree to disagree, but we are doing this. And I think that's the bit, whenever a meeting's not finished appropriately, that's where you get ambiguity and issues can start to come in. So you need to be clear on that. And it's not personal when you have different opinions.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that.
Just a little bit more. I'll just put this whole slide up and we'll just go through this quickly. And I think it's a little bit around what we've talked about, but I mean, every person, when you're involved with any team, it's not just me. Even tennis players, an individual sport, they still have their, their business manager and their strength and conditioning and their physiotherapist and their skills coach. Like they have a team around them. So it's important that because it is a team environment. And the last time I knew the rules of basketball, you're not allowed to inbound the basketball to yourself and then dribble it down the court and score. You actually have to rely on at least one teammate. So it's a team game, and every individual is always faced with decisions. In games, there's thousands of decisions, but away from the court, my preparation, looking after my body, there's decisions everywhere. And so I think when people can start making the right decisions and then are committed to those decisions over and over again, you keep doing the simple things and you're committed to doing the right stuff, then, that's when you can start to see progress. But what really gets you there is when you start making decisions that improve the connection that you have with people in your team. And a good example, and you see it from time to time, and in this picture here, there's this gentleman, the American import here, that's celebrating. Mm-hmm. His name's Isaiah Wilkins. He played at the University of Virginia, the national champions. There was one game last year where in the fourth quarter, he was on the bench just having a rest. He was due to come back into the game. And the player, his backup player, just hit a three and then blocked a shot on defense. And I'd called the sub for him to go to the bench. And then the player came down and hit another three. And he looked at me, and there was only a couple of minutes to go in the game. And he got the best defensive player of the whole league last year. He's an important player for us. And he looked at me and I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "No, leave him on there, coach." So we left the backup player for another minute before we made the sub. So that was an example of when someone makes a decision to put someone else ahead of them, that puts the team's interests ahead of their own individual interests. And I think that doesn't happen all the time, but it's very, very powerful. If you ever have your environment that can be like that, then you're in a very good situation.
Mm-hmm. This is priceless when you have unselfish players who act like that.
Yeah, and even if they have a little bit less talent, they will help the talented players. So they're the important ones. To summarize that, there was a question about the buy-in, players buying into your organization. So this player, Matt Dellavedova, plays in the NBA for the Cavs, the Australian player. So he still is on the Olympic team for Australia. So he put this together. When I applied for a head coaching role back in Australia, he put a little testimony together. So I just put that on the slide, because I think when it comes to trying to get players to buy in, it's not what you think, what you are as a coach and your ego or your beliefs. That doesn't matter. It's what the players are believing. And so I might have messages and I might think I do things, but what do the actual people that are around you think? So this is what he thought. And so I think it's important. I think those traits, everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, but I think some of the strengths that I have, I do work hard for the players, and I think caring for them and building relationships. And I think those are the things that help with player buy-in for sure. Treating people not as a business transaction or a commodity, but actually treating them as people and investing time. And I think with players always, they want to get better, and they'll work hard and they'll put the work in. And so, but it's important that while they're working on things that they want to improve on, maybe it's a player that is close to the NBA, but not yet, and he needs to work on some things. But while they're working on those things to be better for tomorrow, they still can't forget what's the most important things and best things they do right now to help each team that they play for be successful. And so it's always a balancing act. But making the decisions for what is going to help that player right now perform while developing skills that will help them in the future. If you have a player that can balance that, then you're definitely going to have a player that's more bought in. So I think starting with the person and trying to understand the person, having a process in place for that player, and then allowing them to go out and perform and use their skills. And so one of the things that you can do is have some sort of development or performance plan. So this is just a template of the next couple of slides. And so I reference up here, you always start with the person. You know, if a player comes to me and says, I need to improve my shot, can you fix my shot? Well, the first thing is you need to understand the person. Because some people you can be direct and very critical and straight to the point, and that doesn't bother them. Other people are sensitive, you know, and you have to sit down over a coffee and chat and talk about the process with them. So I think understand the person and their personality is really important when you're working with anything that they want to work on in their skill development. And then the next part is that the program needs to be personalized for them. Maybe their body is an issue. They do have some issues with their ankles or their hips. And so even though they want to work hard in improving their game, they need to do it in a way that they look after their bodies. They still put the extra work in, but the plan's got to be smart. So that's the whole process. So they're healthy enough to play. And then the last thing is they need to have patience, because whenever you're trying to work on something in your game, you know, you might take one step forward, 2 steps back, you know, a few more steps forward, and then, you know, you're back again. So I think depending on what the skill is, you know, an element of patience needs to be shown. So that's just, I had to cut this is just a 1-page template. So I just cut it into sections. So we always have things around basketball, you know, what are your basketball goals and how you're going to achieve them, and then how do you prioritize those goals? What's the most important thing out of your goals? There's no point having 5 or 10 different goals that are all the most important thing. You know, you can only have one of the most important things to work on. So prioritize what your goals are, and then you definitely need to have what is the process for feedback? You know, is it shooting tests? Is it video analysis to see if there's improvement? Easier if you're trying to do increase your strength. It's a lot easier to measure those things. How do you measure decision making? You know, it's subjective. So, but you can use video and then talk through decisions. You know, you can extrapolate every pick and roll decision and sit down and go through that with players. It all depends on the time that you have. But yeah, looking at what are the person's goals, I guess, short term, and then, you know, their long term ambitions. I think it's important for players to still have their dreams and their ambitions long term.
Mm-hmm. So I have a quick question. How would you measure decision making? Because I explained why I asked it. With the players that I work with, and it's usually for Russian players, when you talk to the coaches about that player, most of them say, okay, he does make right decisions. And you're asking, okay, but then when you're talking about the import player, I never heard about an import. Of course, import of a higher level who's playing in EuroLeague or Eurocup or even G League. I never heard that, oh, he's not making the right decisions. So in your opinion, how would you measure that? How would you make sure a player not just thinking, oh, the coach is just picking on me? How would he think, okay, he's right. Yeah, that's how I should improve?
I think you need to start with the objective side of things, and that's the outcome. So it can be offense or defense, but let's just talk offense for now. Mm-hmm. So it may be maybe you have a package of horns plays, you know, and you're finding that a player you're having problems with a player, and it's often a young American import coming out, very talented, very good college resume, but that adjustment period to the professional game, it's a different type of game, and that takes a while to adjust. Some people quickly, and others they never get it, and they don't have the job. So I think understanding, as long as the player needs to understand what the objective of that particular offense or action is, the big picture. But then as a coach, where we can help them is the sequence of decisions. And so when there's obviously so much movement in the game, there needs to be some sort of process that a player can work through when they're thinking the game and they're seeing the game and thinking about what they should do next. And so I think as coaches, it's important that we help players understand, hey, you look at the coverage, the pick and roll coverage, or the off-ball defense, like whatever it is, but you need to have, okay, this is the first part, and then this is the second part. And there may be five quick decision or 5 quick components of that one decision on as the playmaker on the pick and roll. Like, what do they look at first? Do they reject the ball screen? So are they looking at the hip of the defender? And then if they're not rejecting it and they're going to use it, now are they looking at, the screener's coverage? Is it a deep drop, or is it a hedge or hard show coverage? But there's always the timing of the game. Things always happen in sequence, and the decisions that players can make need to be aligned to those sequences. And then whether or not the decision was the right decision or not, the most important thing is that no player makes the right decision, or no coach makes the right decision 100% of the time. So it's about trying to improve your decision making so you make better decisions more frequently. And so I think once they understand the sequence of reading the game and what your objective is, then that's important. When teams switch the pick and roll, is your philosophy to exploit the big on offense versus the little defender? Or are you happy for your guard to attack the big defender? Like, do you have a team rule, or is it based on the particular game that you're playing, the scout of that game, like with the talent of your players? So I think this is where it can get into an argument or problems if the little pick and roll player guard is over dribbling the ball, and then the big is rim running to post up and getting frustrated because they don't get the ball, and then the shooters are standing still, not getting the ball passed and not getting a touch. And so I think as a coach, it's important that players understand what is the option number 1, option number 2, option number 3, based on your philosophy on how to attack those situations. And then you can get video and you can sit down and let's look at these, let's just look at these 5 pick and rolls, 5 videos. That's it. Because there's so many decisions alone in each one possession. And I think having a discussion in a coffee shop or somewhere where it's nice and relaxed and you can sit down and just talk. If you put them in front of 3 coaches in the team room and you talk to them firmly, they're not going to listen. So I think how and when you have your meeting and your discussion is very important. The environment's really important if you want the player to buy in and listen to what you're trying to help them with.
I'm writing it down because this is really a good idea that, when you're a player and coach calls you to his office, most of the players will be stressed a little bit. They're like, But then whenever it's like, just like you mentioned, invite him to a coffee shop, this is more relaxed environment and player would feel more comfortable there.
What do we want as coaches? We want the player to be better. So we want them to understand whatever is happening right now isn't good enough. But if they can arrive at, if they can watch the game and think and give you the answers, even better. You know the answers in your head, but if you can have an experience, a comfortable, enjoyable learning experience, and the player can watch and they know that you care about them becoming better, then maybe they're more invested in watching. And the important thing is that time. Like you can't give a player 50 video clips to watch. It's too much information.
Yeah.
They can just watch a couple of possessions, and that alone will be enough. Hey, what do you think? Did you pass it? How was the timing of your pass? Early, perfect, or late? They'll know. What was the accuracy of your pass? Was it behind, in front of the target, or right on the target? So every one little action you can break down. And so I think the thing that we look for is themes. We look for commonalities. So is this player always not using their feet correctly in a defensive situation? And so you focus on that as a priority. Or they're weak on their left-hand dribble and they don't pass the ball to the pop player. Like whatever the situation is, but we do look for not isolated things, but trends, habits, things that they do regularly. That's the other bit, because you can't fix every little thing. You got to prioritize what are the main couple of things.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I wanted to ask the question about the individual performance plan that we have now on the slide. So It says set a realistic target to achieve by the end of the May. But when does it usually start? Like when is the starting line?
Okay, so this actually was a template that we used when we went into lockdown. So in late March, we had to take all the players. Everyone was in their home, and no access to anything, no basketball courts, and no strength and conditioning gym. So we changed our template. So these see these tests.
Yeah.
The normal tests, there's many more tests if we were in the practice facility and we have more equipment. So these were just simpler tests to do. And I think that's why we had May, because when we were in the lockdown in New Zealand, they said that it would be at least a month, but probably longer. And so we changed this from the original preseason plan that we gave in January. We changed this template to suit the 2-month lockdown period, because some of the goals weren't realistic anymore either. Some of the players didn't have a hoop at their house and they couldn't shoot. So that was a process we had to go through to think about how do you change the performance plans. Your diet's different when you eat at home, instead of eating at restaurants and at the, around. There was lots of challenges around that. So that's why that time frame. But that can be anything. This is a template, so you can change it to whatever time frame you want.
Okay, and you mentioned that they didn't have a hoop. So when they are at home and they don't have a place where they can shoot, so when we're talking about basketball development focus goals, would you still have basketball skills for them that need to be developed while they don't have a basket?
Yeah, I mean the majority had a basket. There was only a couple. So so we took from the internet how to do how do you do shooting without a hoop. So things around using lines and that. But what we did was we spoke to the individual player and said, so we provided training plans, 3 training plans a week, skill sessions. And the players that didn't have the hoop, they didn't do as many of the shooting drills, but they did more of the ball handling and passing drills. And they still did agility and strength and those things. So we just had to have flexibility. So the players were already stressed because of the pandemic and being at home. And so the other way was we used the Facebook. And with a private Facebook group, we were able to put some little videos and some challenges. So if you couldn't work on your shot, you could watch. You could watch your favorite player shooting the basketball and do some visualization. So we had the players pick their favorite shooter and coach us what makes that player, why is their shot good. So it's not perfect, but it was something for them to do to think about shooting.
And I had a conversation with former NBA shooting coach Dave Love, and
Yeah,
he always talks at his clinics is something like, today your goal is not to get better as a shooter, but to get better as a shooting coach. And imagine your first client is you. And I'm
yeah,
and I'm
that's
saying,
good.
man, it's right on point.
We have to make ourselves slowly redundant,
Yeah.
the players understanding how to warm their bodies up and do all their prehabilitation work and all the things that they need to do that they get taught by their physio or their trainer, like, because you never know wherever their journey takes them. The best thing they can do is understand their bodies well. Is there any of the coaches there? I know they don't have their videos on, but is there any question? Let's have one of the coaches ask one question.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it. I've already typed in. If coaches have questions, they're more than welcome to ask. But while they still typing or thinking, I'm having my questions lined up.
No worries.
uh,
There was just a couple of other quick strategies I had around just like the player buy-in question. And so
mhm.
I think the clear understanding of what the SOP style of play. So how, as a coach, do we want the game played for this particular team? And so whenever someone watches video or has a discussion, you always think inherently, you think selfishly, you think, how do I fit in? And that's okay. And often we
Mhm.
have a problem with that. But it's important that each individual has to think about how, because that's what they do. They go through that process of trying to fit in. And so having the broad document, again, this is just like an extract of a style of play. So we explain. I'm not sure how clear that is, but we explain like in summary. Like the contents page of the book. This is what we want to do as a team defensively, so they can understand. Hopefully, if the player read that, then they could go away and talk to someone else about what our team is like defensively. So we're successful when we know that the players understand what the team is about, not what I
Okay.
think as the coach. And then you
Okay.
may not be able to read, and it's not important, but we just divide the defensive possession. We have these cornerstones of defense, so we always want to be aggressive with ball pressure. We need to communicate, and we have to play with desire. But while we're playing, have desire to play defense, there has to be discipline. There's no point being ill-disciplined because the offense is too good. So they're just some cornerstones. But then in the game, when we have video preparation and we have analytics right on the whiteboard, some notes, it's always around what are our coverages for this game. So things around when we rebound it, our pick and roll, our post defense, and our closeout. So what are the coverages? How are we going to contain the basketball? Then how are we going to disrupt? And I think I learned a lot from Andre Lamanis, who's the former national coach for the Australian Olympic team. We think when we think about disruption, we think about pressing defense. For full court defense, pressing for 40 minutes. That's a part of it, but there's so many things, little subtle things that you can do to be a disruptive team. You can fake trap. You can change to zone for a possession or show zone and go to man. You can strategically deny a ball reversal. There's so many little things that you can do through the course of the game to be disruptive, to stop the rhythm of the other team. So I think it's important that your philosophy is that you really understand when do you need to contain dribble penetration, and when can you be disruptive as a team, and then
Okay.
commitment is the last thing. So are you committed to the player scouts, the preparing, and the rebounding contest? As you know, you don't win without rebounding.
Okay. Finally, we got a
We
question.
go.
So, what are the first steps of building a winning culture? For example, if at the first day of the job, how do you start the process? And I would add to it, how would you examine what you want to do right at the first day?
Okay. So firstly, my Russian only extends to Das Vidanya. I don't know the person's name. So what's the person's name? I don't.
Ilya,
Sorry.
Ilya, he's the kids coach for Ceska Youth Academy. So he's working with the kids, I believe,
How do I
13 and
say his
younger
first
or
name?
14 and younger. Ilya,
Ilya.
Ilya.
Ilya. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Ilya. So the first steps. So day one, I would ask players, why are you here? And then I would ask,
Okay.
why are we here? Just to create a little bit of stress for the players to understand straight away that we need to, and this is a cliche, but we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so, just asking a question, they're not going to die, just asking a question like that, but say, why are you here? And I guess what often happens is people don't share a lot. And so what it does do is you get an understanding of who's going to answer the question first and who doesn't, and who's shy and who steps back, and who's the alpha dog and who isn't. You also get a bit of an understanding straight away about what motivates players. And so they say, why are you here? Oh, we want to win. Well, how are we going to do that? How do we win? What do you think? And again, I think the reason I do that is I want players to feel like from day one that their voice will be heard, that their opinions, they can share their opinions. And so if they believe that they can contribute and their opinions are going to be heard, then they're more likely to go, oh, I might just, let me get a little bit more information about this. And then I will still have the broad, like this style of play. I'll still have a broad picture of the way we want the game played, but can start to understand the person a little bit more, the more that they talk. So I think that's the first bit towards a winning culture, is to have the people start sharing straight away, getting to know them. And then I think when it comes to the court, so we would have a brief. It depends too on the team. Maybe there's some things. If it's a pro team, your general manager needs to meet, your community person needs to meet. You do medical tests. You do, there's a lot of things that happen in the first week. The first time we're on the court, I start with two things every time. I start with on the ball defense, as in how we use our hands and our feet when we play defense on the basketball. And then so that's technical. And then the second thing is defensive transition.
Okay.
And I think the reason for that is every coach will say that they coach offense and defense, and they coach and they do coach the defense, but whatever you emphasize and whatever you make the priority, if the first thing, once the players are warmed up, the first thing that you do is how do we play defense with the player with the basketball, and how are we playing defensive transition, they'll know straight away that you mean business about defense. And when it comes to winning culture, I don't know any team that's won many championships not being able to play defense or rebounding. So they're just a couple of simple, that's not the whole thing, but that's just some simple examples of, what we're doing the first few steps.
Okay. While we're waiting, I have a question now. So if we keep talking about about the programs with the winning culture, when you come to a team that doesn't have that winning culture, how do you try to fix it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So if you have the ability to recruit players in that have won, have on their resume. They've been in winning teams. That can help if you have that, and it only takes one. There was a famous player in Australia. He played all over the world for 20 years, but particularly in Australia. His name's CJ Bruton, and he's won, I think it's 6 championships in the Australian League, the domestic Australian League. And when the New Zealand Breakers are a professional team here in Auckland, and they were coached by Andre Lamanis, the Olympic coach, and they struggled early in his career as the coach, the first couple of seasons, and then they got had a really good owner. They had a lot of money, good resources, talented players, good import, but they still couldn't win. And CJ came to that club after winning with the Sydney Kings, and again a club that hadn't won before. And he, I guess, right from the get-go, he instilled about the standards, like the stuff that we call it slippage, but the stuff that they allowed the players. And Andre has a very positive culture and very good and awesome, brilliant coach. But at that point, what he realized is that the top couple of players, with this whole thing around, weren't demanding enough of themselves and the rest of the group. And so he just raised the standards because he knew what it took to win. And he knew also that they had a young 7-foot player who basically was being picked on. But what he as the big alpha dog, he told the players that we need that guy. If we're going to win, that kid, he needs to help us. And so stop picking on him and let's make him better. He did that with another skinny little wing player. And these players are now all in their early 30s and were part of 3 championships in a row. And an extremely successful period of time for that franchise. And it was because of one player came in and made a difference and cut out all the old bullshit and explained to guys that actually we need the best out of everyone and not just worry about the best couple of players in the team. So that was a big one, if you can get a player in. And again, we haven't won the championship yet. I've only been here for 1 year. We made the playoffs last year and we lost a close one. But I think you need talent, obviously, to win. If you don't have enough talent, you're not going to give yourself a chance. So you absolutely have to have enough talent. But with the culture, it's really critical that players that maybe haven't won yet, or have been in losing programs, is that you explain to them that winning is a summation of positive habits and the right habits, and you can develop the skills of becoming a winner. You don't win until you get to the end of a season, and so you've got a whole journey that you can go through where if you have the right standards and you raise the standards and people into their skill development and they play to their strengths, and there's so many different ways you can attack it, but it's just changing the attitude and the mindset of players to believe that they have the ability to do it. And a big part is how you prepare for games. And this is something that I've changed because my role with the national team originally was the technical coach. So I was involved with all the scouting and preparation of the opposition teams. And so that job involves all of my time focused on other players and getting ready for opposition. But when it came to the coach, the head coach, preparing the players mentally and tactically for the game, it was pretty much 80% about us and 20% about the other team. We knew the other team was good. We had respect for them, but we prepared the players enough so they felt confident going into games, but we focused more on us and our team. And I think what you find with teams that have the habits of not winning and happy to lose because they've already lost because they've put the other team up on a pedestal and they put them up at the top of the mountain. And at the end of the day, you're side by side in the same game, in the same race, trying to get to the summit. And so, yeah, it's important that you respect the opposition, but you never give the opposition a head start.
Okay.
So I think that's really important about your mindset and your approach. And so you need to focus a lot more on your own team and the skill development, particularly with young kids, because skill errors are what will cost you games. And so if you can be a really skillful young team, you're going to enjoy the game more and you give yourself a better chance. But if you focus so much on the other team, then you're taking away from your focus on your team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to double check. CJ Bruton is the lefty point guard, right?
No, that was Ricky Grace. CJ was a right-handed guy. For many years, he had a big afro and a headband, and then he shaved it.
Okay.
He played for one at the Sydney Kings, the Brisbane Bullets, at the New Zealand Breakers, 3 championships. And there was another team. Maybe he won 2 at Sydney Kings, I think.
Okay. All right. So there's another one from the same Ilya. I work with youth player under 15, and he's overthinking and blaming himself when missing shots or he does something wrong. How do you navigate youth players to be positive in whatever they do?
It's great because it's a big challenge, isn't it? All the time with young players, their emotions are like a roller coaster, and their bodies, each day they're up and down and sore, and it's a fun challenge to coach youth basketball. So the first thing is they need permission to not be perfect. If they think they need to be perfect, then that's unrealistic. The second thing is it's what we call it here mistake response. And so you shoot it and you miss the shot and you put your head down. But the problem with that is, as you know, as coaches, we know the game is so fast. The opposition players, they don't give a shit if you miss the shot. They've already moved on to the next thing. So they have the rebound and they're going off to fast break. And so, again, in the heat of battle, it's easy to yell at the player and get frustrated to get back on defense, or yell at them if their behavior is not good. They put their head down, they don't play defense, or they're late getting back on defense. And so I think, again, young kids are impressionable. So there's no point showing that video in front of the whole team to say, hey, your body language is poor and you're missing the shots, you're blaming yourself, or you're selfish. Sitting down, and I don't know if that is the case with this young player, but that does happen. So I think players will make mistakes, and just sitting down with them before training, instead of standing up, sit down at their level while they're doing their shoes and have a chat and talk about, what you're seeing. And so I would say things like, when a team shoots the shot, what happens next? Who has possession of the ball when the ball is in the air, going through the air? And the player is saying, no one. It's like, exactly right. Who knows? Who's the first person to know whether a shot's going to miss or not? Now, they may know or they may not know. Or the shooter, they got a good feeling. They'll either know or they'll have a good feeling or a hunch that the shot's going to miss. So they have an advantage more than any other player in the gym when the shot goes up. And so I talk to the player around, shoot your shot and hold your follow through, wanting to make the shot. But the second that you've shot it and that's finished and you know that the shot's not going in, you can now be the first person to the next thing, which is transition or rebounding, offensive rebounding or ball pickup. And so I think if you can steer away from the missed shot to being great in the next part, then maybe you can help the player understand that what's more important is the next thing, and then staying in the moment and being great in the next thing. And that's not easy. Kids have strong emotions, so they will continually be up and down, but I think that's important. And when you have several of those conversations with individual players, now you can start having it with small groups of players. What do we think about what happened there? And maybe one player says, we need to get back on defense quicker. Or I should have gone for the rebound. or and so again we start inviting players to comment and talk. So I think that's really, really important. That's a positive way to try and help correct behavior. Because as a coach, you can always still go back to, you can yell, you can be firm, you can always do that. But the less you do that, the more impactful it will be when you need to do that.
Okay. And
I don't know if that would work with Russian culture, though. I'm not too sure.
it should work with every culture worldwide to me. I mean, you just have to make those little adjustments, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I have a couple more left for myself, but if other coaches want to ask questions, you're more than welcome. So I wanted to ask, what was your biggest advantage? What was your biggest challenge in your coaching career?
Okay. I got one slide left, so do you want me to just finish that, and then we'll get to those questions?
Yes.
Yeah. So just to finish that off and the players was, I think, understanding that everyone is so important. This whole cog, you're an important cog, critical cog in our whole mechanism, our whole motor. And so it just takes one to not be working and the whole thing doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So I think with young players and maybe some ego and some confidence, like they know that, but that's the story I talked about with CJ and the young 7-foot player. It's the team understanding that, it's a piece of beautiful machinery when we all work together, and using Golden State Warriors examples of that beautiful ball movement, like stuff that the young kids can relate to. I think that stuff's good. If you can show them what poetry in motion and beautiful rhythmic basketball can look like, where everyone's involved, I think that's a good way to do it. And then we already talked about it, but how each individual player might learn differently. So some might want to walk around on the court with you and go through things. Others can just watch video. Maybe it's the diagrams that you draw, but find the best way to connect with each player with their learning, because this is all about learning. And then, if it is, I don't know with young players, but, I don't know. What age do Russian kids start drinking coffee?
It depends. Really, I never drank coffee. I don't like the taste.
Or tea, or milkshakes, whatever it is. But in a safe environment, something where they're relaxed. If a person's relaxed, they'll learn more. They'll take more on board. So there was that, and then the last part. Oh, that was around mental toughness. Do you want to skip through that, or?
No. Let's go through that.
Okay. So this is the last slide. So I think mental toughness. So firstly, we have a mental skills coach or a performance psychologist, depending on what the discipline is called in each country. And so one of the things that he's talked about is the life skills that you can teach all youth players, particularly, but also professionals, that are transferable skills across all parts of life. So instead of just being about the basketball part, can you concentrate on your free throw? It's there's some basic skills that carry over, in all parts of life. So and having, they call it cognitive flexibility, but having those skills. So I think if you're skillful, it's easier to be tough, or what people think are tough. You can be more resilient because you have the skills to deal with difficult situations. Navy SEAL training and, people that work in armed forces, like they do all of their training and they have all of their discipline. So as they're involved in close contact fire or, shootouts and in real life-threatening situations, the best are the most calmest, because they know that they need a calm mind to be able to make decisions and assess. So I think, basketball is not life and death, but there's a lot of military training that I see in books and different speakers, that how you go about becoming tough mentally, those skills are learned that can carry over into, blocking out a crowd of 10,000 people while you're at the free throw line, or continuing to fight when your team is down, when a run goes against them. So I just put a few skills there. I think, kids need to learn how to plan. And because if they develop a skill of planning, then that planning can be across all walks of life later on. They can plan their finances and their budget when they become adults. They can plan their goals for university or studies. They can plan their basketball plan. So planning is really important skill to develop. The thing about learning and having a mindset of wanting to grow and keep getting better is important, especially with younger players, if you can shape their thinking. The positive self-talk, so that's a skill, and imaging, visualizing and picturing. There's been all those studies about, like visualizing the outcome, visualizing, like how the offense should work. Hey, if the pick and roll coverage is this, what am I seeing? So I think that's important. Pain management. So we think mental toughness, like kids are soft if they get injured. So understanding about pain management and what's actually they're injured and they need to get treatment versus, it's actually okay to feel some pain. That's a good thing. So kids need to be educated on that. Mindfulness and relaxing the mind. So how do you, after playing a basketball game, a big or training hard, how do you go from a busy, active head to relaxed? Because the recovery and calmness, if you can actually practice that skill, that will help you when you actually get into games, when you need to calm down. And then, focus and dealing with pressure and anxiety. So all those things are skills that I think are just general strategies that can help improve the mental toughness. I'm not an expert in mental toughness or in sports psychology, but being around a lot of professionals, all of this information is easily available. So I think actually having a plan, just like you teach a jump shot, just like you teach how to stretch or how you warm up the body, I think having regular skills that you incorporate into your training, mental skills training, it's just as important. And I use this analogy: you can have the most talented, skillful player in the world, but if their mind's not right, it's like a golf player. Their swing might be beautiful, but if their head's not right on the golf swing, they hit it out of bounds. So it's important that your mind's right. And then around training those specifically, which is what the question was about. This was just a random. This is from the other day, actually, yesterday, 2 days ago. Just a example of a training session, practice session. Things that we can do to help mental toughness. So I think the first thing is when we do our, like when you do a drill at practice or a situation, it needs to be realistic and achievable. And the other bit is like the rules of the scrimmage or the rules of the drill and the outcomes need to be clear. And we make that mistake. Everyone makes that mistake because we think players aren't tough if they're not playing hard or they're not executing or they look like they're distracted. But often we need to check as coaches, hey, were we clear on what the drill is and what the expectation is? Start with us before you go to them. And then the other few things, like I like to make drills difficult to have players think, overload their senses, but you also need to have some sort of reward. So, very simple. If you make it, you take it, you stay on offense. Or if it's a defensive drill, if it's 5 stops, to win the game. So you rewarded. You stay on defense if you get a stop because the drill is to win it. You need to get stops. So, coming up with ways to have an incentive for players in their games. But while saying that, there has to be non-negotiables, so the standard's high, and that's where you can build that toughness. So if we do a defensive drill and the shell drill or players are passing, and as we close out, if your hands are down, boom, hands are down. You get one warning. The next time you're off defense, the next team comes in on defense.
Okay.
You lost the opportunity, because what we're trying to coach is decision making. We're trying to coach the skill execution. So that's what you should coach. Not worry so much about the outcome, but the actual detail. Is it getting executed? And I think that's where, and then you do have drills. They're realistic, but you have drills like we have some stuff at the end of practice where the little guards will go against the bigs in one-on-one drive from the top. And then little guards have got to play defense on the post player in the post. And so it's fun and it's competitive, but like you don't finish until you've got your number of stops. So things that just a bit harder. Physically, they're harder because they're a bit fatigued at the end of practice, and no one likes to get scored on. So, not every day, but there's things that you can do like that. Just resilience drills, just to keep building mental toughness.
Got it. I have a question. I see their load. So do you use any wearables during practice?
Not at this level. In the Australian NBL, they have catapult. They have the same as the NBA, but in the New Zealand league, no, they don't have the budget. So that's why we do the load management there.
Okay.
We have an app that we use. So that's the load that working with the conditioning coach, he sets the total amount for the day, and then I design the practice. So we plan the week. 1 week we plan the whole season, but then we break it into the weeks.
Okay.
And so I just plan the drills according to how much we should be doing as a team.
And how do you find out what load each drill has?
The load, we can't scientifically. All we can do is what the time on the clock and what we think the rating is, and then so we can't do it drill by drill without the catapult wearables. But what we can do is every player rates the session, every session they do, and so we can get a comparison between what the players rated the session and what I think the session should have been, and then we can investigate which players find it too easy, who is finding it very hard, and we can have those discussions. We have our whole staff, our physio, our strength conditioning, assistant coaches, myself, we meet to discuss those things.
So basically, by the end of the practice, each player needs to write down, let's say, warm-up, pass and drill, defensive concept, and they need to put basically easy, medium, hard.
Not per drill. At the moment, we do it for just the whole session.
Okay.
And they have an app, so they get onto their app and they just log it in their app. So they have like a scale 1 to 10.
Okay.
So they put in how hard, how difficult they thought, or how much energy they used for that session, based on 1 being low and 10 being high.
And can you tell me the name of the app? Do you think it's free to use, or people can download it?
It's extremely cheap. It's an Australian app that I actually helped design years ago, that a few of the pro clubs are using now. I'll put it in the chat for some reason. Let me just try that.
Okay, on yourgoal.com.
So it does other things too. Again, we at another time we can talk. It has reports and welfare. We every day we check the welfare of players. So they will. I'll just bring it up now. I don't even know if you can see. That's the app on the screen.
Okay.
And then players each day, each morning by 8 a.m. They answer wellness questions. How many hours did they sleep? What was their quality of their sleep? How they feeling? If they're sick, so if they're sick and they put a message in that they're sick, notification comes to the staff, so we're aware.
Okay. This
So
to me that's a great idea because most of the coaches we don't have the luxury of having a catapult and
yeah,
spending money on that, and so you're basically giving a practical example how people can use it while still not spending a lot of money on it.
this is extremely cheap and effective, and it was designed for youth players originally,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like young elite youth players, and I used a semi-professional team I was the head coach of as the pilot the test team, and then we used the Brisbane Bullets, my old professional club that I coached at. The first 2 years we had the players have actually helped design this, so this has been designed by sports scientists, players and coaches alike. It has the other things too around your calendar, all sorts of basic functions that are, I don't know, you may or may not be able to see, but that's the home screen with it
Okay.
has all the people's contact information. You can put video on there. You can get your reports. There's chatting, like team chat functions, those sorts of things.
Okay.
The doc. So it still could be better, but it's definitely improved. It's only a couple of years old, and there's many basketball organisations now that we use it all through New Zealand now because it's so cost effective.
Okay. Got it.
I think. Oh, hang on. Let me go back. Oh no, we talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. So if there's any other questions, I do have some other slides that, just depending on what the questions were, might help answer. But if not, yeah, let me know.
Okay. So I wanted to ask 1 second. Let me see mine. So yeah, that's a good one. So Australian teams, as most people know, play super hard and play for each other. So basically, the epitome of the team. In your opinion, why and how Australia does that? Is it the approach to practice, people's mentality, or something else?
Um, I think, and I think it's New Zealand as well, as a small country
Okay.
that they
Yeah.
play.
Hmm.
New Zealand is so tough for, a population of 5 million or less, and so geographically isolated. It's not like Australia and New Zealand. They don't, you can't get European countries to come to Australia to play national team games. Our closest competition is Southeast Asia, and not to be disrespectful, but the Philippines are a good basketball country, China and Japan, but it's not like your, Russia, Lithuania, and France and Spain, and everything is so close. So I think it's a few things. It is the distance. It's the history too, I guess. Maybe like most countries that have been not war torn, but have fought in wars and have that sort of spirit. Like Australia is, as a country, is, it's beautiful with beaches, but the land is hard. When it was first settled, so from generation to generation, there's been difficult environmental things, like droughts and cyclones and you name it. So I mean, it's a comfortable country now in this modern era to live in. It's a very comfortable country, but I think just over the generations, it's been, and we've had a lot of migrants from different countries around the world. So it's a very multicultural country, and so when you put people in a sporting context, they ultimately will reflect what society is about. And
Okay.
I feel like Australians are good people. They love to have a good time, and they do things hard. They say there's a joke saying we play hard and we party hard. We love to have beer, and so I don't know. I think that's just part of the culture over many years, many generations. That we're a tough, resilient society, but we also like a good time, and so I think with our teams. I think many years ago, 70 years ago, there was, US military bases in Australia and training, and the Australian, the church had a lot to do. Different churches had a lot to do with basketball being started, and so we always had a little bit of US influence in our game. But I think over time, Australian people took learnings from the US game, but then applied our own version. And we figured to be successful, we need to play tough. We need to play full court defense. And, I think we've got more skillful players now because we have more players in the NBA and more higher professional players. But for a long time, for many, many years, our Olympic teams were very competitive. Just playing that tough, never back down from a fight, never back down from anybody sort of attitude. This is part of our DNA.
Okay. And I have one more question that I wanted to ask. So from your experience last year, being your first year as head coach for the Rams, what lessons did you learn that you'll for sure use next year?
I think the most important is the chemistry and leadership of the team. We're allowed 3 imports in our league. Not this year. It's just going to be a no import short league, a different competition. But normally it's a 3 import league, and Australians are considered imports. So we were able to recruit two Australian players, and then the American gentleman Isaiah Wilkins from Virginia. And those 3 players that we had Emmett Nah, who was a point guard that played at St. Mary's College in the US, who are a very good college team, one of the top sort of 25 college teams. He was a very good floor leader point guard. And we had a very good shooter, a guy called Cameron Glidden, who's been on the Australian Australian World Cup team and national team for many years. And he was 29 years old. So he was like our veteran guy. So I think having leadership, having the right players that are your best players, but also culturally, they reflected everything that I was hoping that we could create in our environment. They were very professional. They were very good with the local players. So the relationship between the New Zealand players and the imports was very, very strong. So they socially connected, and they connected in the locker room. So that's probably the thing that's most important. And then the other part was we were a very good defensive team, but I believe that we practiced that way, and we believed in it, and we valued it, and we rewarded it. It was just something that we talked about all the time, the detail, the closeouts, the angle of your feet, the talk that was required. I think we coached the defense in detail, and we did a really good job. So we were a good offensive team, but we weren't as very close to the best couple of teams. So that will be the biggest area to improve this year, is it just a little bit more up tempo, a little bit more attacking.
Got it. Thank you very much for your questions. And since there are no more questions from people, I just wanted to say thank you again for finding the time. And before we finish, is there any way you can email me the presentation just so people?
Absolutely, yeah. I'll send it through to you. I might have to just shrink down the. Do you want it in PDF format? Is that the easiest way?
Yeah, PDF would be great.
Yeah. Okay. No worries at all. There's a couple of comments there.
Yeah.
What's the 3 most important things in Russian basketball at the moment for young coach or for coaches? What are the three biggest challenges?
I think number 1 is be willing to learn from English speakers, just willing to learn through that language barrier.
Yeah.
Because not that many people are ready to. There are a lot of clinics now, and most of them are in English with good speakers, but there are not a lot of coaches or players who are willing to learn and get out of the comfort zone. And I'm trying to do now some translations of the talks that I did with the other coaches. And so most of the coaches, they're used to be comfortable, and they're simply just waiting for. I think you send in the messages to me.
Yeah. I just keep
You're
going.
good.
So
Yeah. But yeah, they're the coaches and the players in general. They're just comfortable by speaking Russian, not learning the English. And so I think that's number one challenge, and it's the main one because nowadays most of us have to stay home, and you just have plenty of opportunities to learn. So when everything goes back to normal, you're basically like a Phil Jackson. You know it all. You can you can perform on the court and do well for your team.
now you just need to be able to apply it. So learning
Yeah,
knowledge is one thing. There's so much knowledge
yeah.
out there during being at home, but yeah, now you have to figure out what are you actually going to apply.
Mhm.
You know,
This is one thing that when I was at Kevin Eastman, the former assistant coach for Clippers in
yeah,
Boston, when I
yeah,
was at his coaching camp, that's one thing that he told us that you cannot be a smart man by just knowing something, but by knowing how to use it and how to apply.
yeah, absolutely. There's And there's no point having a manual on how to shoot a gun and knowing everything about the gun and every little piece of it and all that sort of stuff if you don't know how to take the safety off or actually use the thing. So yeah, it's important to. I think that was the challenge. We spoke with our coaches here. We meet with a group of coaches regularly, and there was so many clinics like this one tonight and other, just information everywhere, information overload. So
Yeah.
I kind of warned a few of the coaches around be a bit more strategic around what information that you want to go seek. And then, so you don't need to try and learn everything, just like players, like focus on a couple of things you really want to learn more about and just prioritize that. Don't go do something because it's the most popular or coolest thing to do. Do it because you believe it's an area you need to learn more on, and then take the time to reflect, because it's no good absorbing all that information and then not knowing what to do with that information. You need time to think about how does it fit in with your philosophy and with your planning.
Fully agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again for your time, and thank you
No
everybody
worries.
for tuning in. We'll save the stream and we'll upload it to YouTube later, just so people who were not able to watch. I know that in States it's right in the middle of the night, so those people will definitely have to go to YouTube. But this live stream will be uploaded too.
You'll be able to edit the start of it, maybe.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
No worries. Oh, thanks for having me, and I wish all the coaches all the best on their coaching journey. Enjoy it.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you.
No worries.
Have a good night.
Good night.